At 7:41 a.m. Eastern Time this morning, on Thursday, March 19th, 2026, the Iranian government simultaneously transmitted a formal diplomatic note to exactly 12 foreign ministries spread across the globe. Those capitals included Beijing, Tokyo, Brussels, New Delhi, Seoul, Ankara, Riyadh, Moscow, Islamabad, Jakarta, Kuala Lumpur, and Pretoria. The note itself was notably brief and meticulously crafted in its wording, clearly intended to be released and circulated immediately so that its contents could reach the international community without any delay. In the message, Iran declared that it would reopen the Strait of Hormuz to commercial shipping traffic beginning in exactly 48 hours, but only for every country that had not carried out any unilateral military operations against the Islamic Republic. Importantly, neither the State Department nor the Pentagon received any prior notification or advanced warning about this development. The White House itself only learned about the announcement in the same manner that everyone else is learning about it right now, directly through breaking news reports. In effect, Iran has just instructed roughly 20% of the world's entire oil supply to begin flowing once more, while at the same time explicitly directing America to remain on the sidelines and stay out of the picture entirely. This move does not represent any kind of ceasefire agreement. It also does not amount to a negotiated resolution or compromise of any sort. Instead, what we are seeing is Iran carrying out what stands as the most precise and calculated geopolitical counterstrike of the 21st century so far. Through this action, Iran has surgically reopened the planet's single most vital energy artery, making it available once again to every major economy around the world, all while deliberately maintaining the full blockade against any American commercial interests. Tehran has effectively turned the Strait of Hormuz into a clear loyalty test for the international community, and nearly the entire world is now stepping forward to meet that test and pass it. Every single nation, except the one that originally launched the strikes in the first place. What we are witnessing unfold right now amounts to the complete and total structural collapse of the Trump administration's entire Iran strategy. For several weeks leading up to this moment, officials in Washington had calculated that keeping the strait closed would generate such intense global economic pressure that China, Europe, and the Gulf states would eventually have no choice but to come together and fully unite behind America's military campaign directed against Tehran. The underlying theory behind this approach had appeared elegant and straightforward on paper. The idea was that Iran would block the flow of oil, the world would direct its blame squarely at Iran would then collapse under the weight of maximum economic pressure, and Trump would ultimately be able to claim the greatest foreign policy victory of his entire presidency. Yet every single assumption built into that careful calculation has now shattered completely. Over the course of the next several minutes, I'm going to carefully walk you through precisely what Iran announced this morning and explain in clear detail why this selective reopening is proving far more devastating to Washington than the original closure ever managed to be. I will also lay out the quiet diplomatic back channel that has existed between Throne and Beijing, the one that made this very announcement possible. And I will show why China's direct involvement means the United States cannot simply reverse this development without immediately triggering an entirely new crisis. In addition, I will detail the immediate market reaction that has already taken place and that clearly confirms how global capital has already reached its own firm judgment about which side came out ahead in this confrontation. I will further clarify exactly what this development means for the already postponed Trump-I summit and why Beijing now enters any future negotiations holding significant leverage that Washington simply does not have an effective answer for at this time. Finally, I will outline 3 realistic scenarios for how the next 72 hours are likely to unfold as the White House scrambles urgently to find some kind of response that it does not yet possess. If you have never subscribed to this channel before, I strongly encourage you to do so right now, and because what I am about to show you and explain is simply not being covered or analyzed anywhere else with this same level of precision and depth. Let me begin by walking you carefully through the Iran announcement itself, because the specific language chosen in the note was certainly no accident. Every single word and phrase appears to have been deliberately selected in order to maximize Washington's humiliation, while at the same time giving the rest of the world exactly the reassurance and clarity it needed to hear. Tehran's communique did not simply describe some temporary lifting of the existing blockade. Instead, it carefully framed the action as a permanent restoration of commercial passage rights for what the document referred to as non aggressor nations. According to the clear definition provided in the text, a non aggressor nation is any country that has not conducted direct military strikes against Iranian sovereign territory or offered any material military support for such strikes. That definition completely excludes the United States. It also completely excludes Israel. At the same time, it fully includes everyone else, every European nation, every Asian economy, every Gulf state that chose not to participate directly in the strikes, and indeed the entire developing world. The communique goes on to specify 5 distinct operational components in careful detail. First, commercial tankers registered under the flag of any non-aggressor nation are now permitted to transit the Strait of Hormuz beginning in 48 hours, and they may do so under completely normal maritime procedures. Iranian naval vessels will actively escort those passages rather than obstruct them in any way. Second, insurance underwriters based in London, Hamburg, Tokyo, and Singapore, who had previously suspended all coverage for Hormuz transits the moment the blockade began, are now formally notified that Iranian forces will guarantee the physical safety of all non-aggressor vessels. This assurance directly removes the primary barrier that had prevented those insurers from reinstating coverage. Third, Iran has committed to providing 72-hour advanced navigational safety certifications to any non-aggressor vessel operator that requests them. This step creates a practical bureaucratic infrastructure that effectively legitimizes the selective access and transforms it into something that functions more like a permanent toll system rather than a short-term wartime measure. Fourth, the announcement specifically names China, India, Japan, South Korea, and the European Union as priority partners for the restored flow of oil. This inclusion serves as a deliberate and unmistakable signal that Iran is not merely reopening the strait, but actively restructuring who stands to benefit most from its control moving forward. Fifth, any attempt by U.S. Navy forces to escort American-flagged vessels or any vessels tied to American interests through the strait will immediately be classified as a hostile military action and will receive an appropriate military response. The plain translation of all this is straightforward. America is allowed to watch as the oil begins flowing again, but it cannot actually access or participate in that flow. The strategic outcome is therefore no longer a simple blockade. It has now become a functioning toll booth, and America stands as the only nation on Earth that lacks the necessary token required to enter and pass through. And subscribe right now and make sure to turn on notifications because what I'm about to explain next concerns the diplomatic architecture that sits behind this announcement. It also explains precisely why the Trump administration never anticipated this move and currently has no prepared response ready to deploy. According to multiple diplomatic sources who possess direct knowledge of the Beijing back channel, China's special envoy was dispatched to the region within just hours of the U.S.-Israeli strikes that resulted in the death of Supreme Leader Ali Khamenei. That envoy then spent a full 9 days engaged in intensive discussions. Those conversations extended well beyond the humanitarian ceasefire language that Washington had been publicly demanding. Instead, they covered a complete framework for the post-conflict regional order. Beijing's core offer to Tehran was both comprehensive and strategic. China pledged to ensure that Iran's oil export revenues would be fully restored within 90 days of any reopening. China also committed to purchasing Iranian crude at contracted prices set above current market levels for the next 3 years. In addition, Beijing promised to accelerate major infrastructure investments under the existing China-Iran Comprehensive Strategic Partnership, an agreement that already locks in $400 billion in Chinese investment spread across the next 25 years. In exchange for these substantial commitments, Iran agreed to proceed with a selective reopening that explicitly excludes the United States. This arrangement has delivered 2 extraordinary strategic gifts directly to Beijing. First, China has now secured guaranteed access to low-cost energy supplies at the exact moment when global oil markets remain most disrupted and most expensive. Second, China has demonstrated to every nation watching that it possesses the ability to resolve a crisis originally created by the United States. In doing so, Beijing has positioned itself as the indispensable diplomatic actor operating in the most strategically sensitive waterway on the entire planet. This brings us to receipt number one, which concerns the energy arithmetic involved. Before the blockade ever began, approximately 21 million barrels of oil transited the Strait of Hormuz on a daily basis. That volume represented roughly 21% of total global oil consumption. During the period of the blockade, global oil prices surged well past $140 per barrel for the first time since 2008. China, which imports around 11 million barrels per day and sources nearly half of that volume through the Hormuz corridor, was facing additional energy costs estimated at $350 million every single day when compared with pre-crisis price levels. The selective reopening has now eliminated that entire daily cost burden for Beijing in a single stroke. For Washington, however, the calculation runs in the opposite direction. American energy companies with direct interests in Gulf production, American airlines operating with hedged fuel contracts, and American manufacturers heavily dependent on petrochemical inputs must all continue operating under $140 per barrel conditions. Meanwhile, their Chinese and European competitors are able to return immediately to much lower cost supply chains. The competitive disadvantage this situation creates for the broader American industrial base only continues to compound with every passing week. The selective blockade against American interests therefore remains firmly in effect.